Hello, and welcome to I Know Dino, the Big Dinosaur Podcast, where we cover news, interviews, and discussions of all things dinosaur.
Hello and welcome to I Know Dino. I'm Garrett.
And I'm Sabrina.
And today's podcast is brought to you by TRX Dinosaurs. They make some awesome dinosaur sculptures and puppets, and they make everything by commission. So check them out at trxdinosaurs.com or on Instagram at trxdinosaurs. This week we have Dinosaur of the Day, Lufengosaurus. We have an interview with Dr. Jordan Mallon, and we have a bunch of dinosaur news, as well as a dinosaur gift-giving guide. But first, as always, we would like to thank some of our Stegosaurus patrons. This week we would like to thank Kyle, Brendan, the Tolbert family, Sean Tanagaki, Remy Rodriguez, Marcy, and Rohan.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. We really appreciate everything you do, and we've been thinking a lot about that, especially, we're, getting into the holiday season, or I guess we're in the middle of it now, and thinking about all of the people we've gotten to connect with over the past year and all of the amazing stuff that we've learned because of this podcast. So we really appreciate all that you do and all of our patrons. And if you want to join this growing group of amazing people, then check out our page at patreon.com/iknowdino.
And unfortunately, Patreon just changed their policy, so they used to charge us a fee on every transaction, but they switched it to the patron side, charging a fee, and we didn't have any option to opt out of that. We wanted to, but Patreon said that we couldn't, so sorry about that.
Yeah, we're not the most pleased about, but
yeah.
We do appreciate still all of your support.
Yeah, it is a pretty small fee. I think it's roughly like a quarter or thereabouts. So, and it isn't a new fee. We used to pay it. So it's not like Patreon is jacking up fees. They just switched it from the Patreon-y side.
From the creators to the patrons, yeah.
Yeah, so sorry about that. But on a happier note, we have a new dinosaur to talk about this week.
Ooh.
Yeah. It comes from a study of Archaeopteryx finds, and it was written by Christian Foth and Oliver Rauhut, and it was published in BMC Evolutionary Biology. What the authors did is they looked at all 12 of the Archaeopteryx finds that have been discovered to date, and they reviewed them to see if the classification kind of held up between all 12 of them being the same species. Before all of these recent discoveries in China, Archaeopteryx was the only pre-Cretaceous paravian found so far, as they describe it, basically meaning in the Jurassic, the only thing we knew of that was sort of like a bird was Archaeopteryx, but now in China we see this stuff all the time popping out of the ground. So what the researchers really found was that one specific individual, known as the Haarlem Archaeopteryx, was different than the other ones. So this one was discovered in 1855 in Germany, near the Dutch town Haarlem, I think is how you say it. It's like Harlem in New York, except with two A's. I'm not sure what that does to the pronunciation, but it wasn't described until 2 years later in 1857. And then it was described as Pterodactylus crassipes by von Meyer. And the reason that they thought it was a pterodactyl, basically, even though it's a pterodactylus, and pterodactyl is the wrong word. That's an aside. Was because obviously it had wings, and a lot of the things that you think of when you think of an Archaeopteryx are like the toothed beak. You couldn't see in the fossil because it's not a full body that's preserved. It wasn't until 1970 that it was reclassified as Archaeopteryx by John Ostrom. And like I said, it wasn't nearly as complete as the holotype, but it was actually found earlier than the holotype. So it was kind of sitting around as a pterodactyl while the Archaeopteryx was getting named. When you look really closely at this Haarlem specimen, you can actually see feather impressions, which are a pretty good indicator that it's not a pterodactyl because they didn't have feathers. And there are vertebrae, gastralia, parts of the legs, arms, feet, and hands. But it's all kind of jumbled up, and when you just look at it at a glance, it just looks like two little bones with some other indeterminate claws to the untrained eye, not like the Archaeopteryx fossil that everyone's familiar with that is just obviously this bird-like creature in that lithographica, awesome awesomeness. So what these authors did is they pointed out that it's more of an anchiornithid, meaning more like a bird-like dinosaur from China, than it is like an Archaeopteryx. So the authors named it Ostromia crassipes, and Ostromia comes after John Ostrom, who was the first to point out that it was a theropod and not, in fact, a pterodactylus.
Everything I hear about him is pretty great.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool dude, or was. And then crassipes comes from that original name, because if you move a species from one genus to another, you're not allowed to change the species name unless you're making it invalid and synonymizing it. So they had to stick with crassipes. They didn't actually say where it came from, and I couldn't find online the 1857 article. So I just had to guess at what crassipes comes from. I think it's from crassus, which means thick, and pes, or pes, which is foot in Latin. So it would be thick foot, I guess. And if you're wondering what it looked like, it's still quite a bit like an Archaeopteryx, but like I said, just a little bit more like some of these flying four-winged dinosaurs that we know in China. It's actually a little bit more like Anchiornis, and similar size too, so it's kind of in the ballpark of a crow, if you're trying to imagine it, but a crow with 4 wings and bigger claws. And teeth. So maybe not that much like a crow, other than size.
Yeah. Maybe color.
Yeah. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about Jurassic World, and spoiler alert, there is some new information coming out, and the trailer gave away some of the plot. We're going to talk a little bit in depth about the trailer, so if you don't want to know anything about the trailer or other Jurassic World news, just skip ahead a little bit so we don't ruin it.
And we'll get to that in a second, but there's also a couple other cool things. So there's a new Carlton Kids book coming out next May called Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, the official augmented reality book, which sounds pretty cool. I think they might have done one for Jurassic World, the first one. At least it sounds like it did, but I guess, didn't hear about it till now. So they've got descriptions of new dinosaurs we can expect in the movie. And the description of the book says, quote, Carlton's official augmented reality book is jam-packed with exclusive movie imagery and background facts and lets you experience original Jurassic World dinosaurs through mind-blowing next-generation, fully interactive digital magic. Learn how to bond with and train Alpha Velociraptor Blue, then use her as your protector and guide as you encounter other dinosaurs through the app. From brand new movie dinosaur characters including awesome baryonyx and a terrifying new hybrid breed to old favorites like T-Rex and Stegosaurus, this Jurassic World AR book will wow readers all over again. So that's pretty cool. And apparently baryonyx hasn't been in the films, but it's been part of the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World worlds. Like they had their own paddock on the map, and it was almost one of the main dinosaurs in Jurassic Park 3, but then replaced by Spinosaurus, which makes sense. In terms of the new hybrid dinosaur, too, people are speculating it's an Indoraptor, which we've talked about, and that's based on pictures of merchandise that's coming out. So it was a pretty exciting way to see the first trailer. There were all these teasers that came out every day before the trailer came out, and then we were hearing like it was first appearing in the middle of a football game on like Thursday Night Football or something.
Yeah, and then there was an announcement that was actually inaccurate. So we were like, oh no, good thing we didn't report that though. But then it turned out to actually be real news after that.
Yeah.
So going back and forth.
And now you can find the trailer on YouTube, and it's a really good trailer.
It is.
Like really well done. A lot of action. It's a little bit different than what we were expecting, right? We were talking about.
It is very different, yeah.
Because we were thinking, well, what if the dinosaurs are pets? But it's more like how to save the dinosaurs.
Yeah, and the beginning started out of the trailer a lot like how Jurassic World, I guess 3 started out, where they were trying to convince people to go back to the island kind of thing. And it was actually maybe like 2 also. Pretty common.
Well, there's Ian Malcolm is back, so that is like Jurassic World 2.
Yeah, that's true.
Or Jurassic Park 2.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so apparently the character Claire has founded an organization called Dinosaur Protection Group, which I think may have its own website now. And Bryce Dallas Howard, the actress who plays her, said in some interview somewhere that they're looking for a way to get the dinosaurs off of Isla Nublar.
Yeah, so I guess basically Claire ended up replacing the characters that were looking for their lost kid in Jurassic World 3. But now instead she's trying to convince people to go to the island to save dinosaurs from an erupting volcano.
Yeah.
And that was totally different than what we expected, although we knew there were hints about there potentially being a volcano in this movie, so I guess maybe we should have seen it coming. But most of the trailer is of them and dinosaurs kind of running from an exploding volcano.
The early stages.
Well, I don't know. I guess it's the early stages. Volcanic eruptions aren't that long, though, so...
No, but they're still able to run away, so...
Yeah, and then they show Chris Pratt getting engulfed in a basically pyroclastic flow, which would definitely kill him. But that probably won't end up happening in the movie. And then it seems like, from watching that would be the very end of the movie, because it's like the volcano erupted, they all end up jumping off a cliff, and whatever dinosaurs were still on the island at that point would probably be dead. So I don't really know how that fits into the plot of trying to save them off the island. Maybe there's like a small section that doesn't get destroyed by the volcano, and so then they have to like get together the ragtag group that remains to try to like piece together a sort of like Apollo 13 style rescue mission.
Yeah, you were saying maybe that happens in the beginning of the movie.
I hope so, because otherwise it's like you just know how the movie's going to end the whole time you're watching it.
Because there's also been photos released of the museum with this giant skull. And then there's another part of the trailer that shows Chris Pratt, or Owen Grady, actually, really up close to a T-Rex in a cage.
Oh, yeah, and then we saw that little clip of him petting. Oh, but that was a flashback to him, like, tickling Blue's chin.
Oh, yeah, there was that 6-second clip that came out of Owen Grady stroking the chin of a baby raptor, and that turns out that's Blue.
Yeah, because that was apparently the way that Claire convinces him to go back to the island is because he loves Blue, and Blue is on the island.
There was also a behind-the-scenes video that came out right before the trailer was released, and that shows that there's more dinosaurs than in previous movies, so that's good, because I think I remember reading somewhere if you take the number of minutes you actually see dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, it's like a surprisingly small amount of the movie. So this is good. Plus, we got a first look at Dr. Ian Malcolm's return. It looks like he's testifying about dinosaurs in court, but you don't hear him say too much yet.
I kind of interpreted it as he wanted to convince people not to go back to the island, but you took it the other way, which was that he was encouraging them to go back. It was a little bit unclear.
Yeah. I guess it would go with his character to tell people not to go.
Yeah. But he was basically just saying, in response to like whether or not getting the dinosaurs off the island was a good idea, that it's like, well, you know, they were here before us and therefore might be here after us if we save them, kind of thing.
Yeah. And it also looks like there's a lot of stunt work in the movie, which isn't too surprising. They're showing parts where the actors are underwater, and then they're in this like roller coaster like simulation type thing. And they also show that there's definitely a baryonyx and fire.
Yeah.
So, lots of stuff to look forward to.
For sure. I'm a little disappointed that the plot wasn't everybody has dinosaur pets and then they turn on everyone, though. I really like that idea.
Well, if this is going to be an ongoing series, you never know.
Yeah, maybe Jurassic World 3.
All right, and now that we are into mid-December, we thought we would do a holiday gift guide this year. Last year, we had a really great crossover with Brad Jost from the Jurassic Park podcast. And this year, we got some recommendations from some of our listeners, and we kind of bought more stuff, I think. So
yeah, that could be.
I feel like we had more ideas of what to recommend. So we have 10, give or take, ideas of dinosaur-themed gifts that we think would be great. We're looking at this through the eyes of if you're an adult dinosaur enthusiast, but a lot of these gifts also work well for kids.
Yeah, for sure. And apologies that it's a little bit late, because usually gift guides come out in like November. Oops. But some of these are available on Amazon and things like that, so that you can get them quickly if you need to.
So the first one, thank you to Tim who sent this recommendation to us via email. It's called the Betsey Johnson Betseysaurus Rex Purse on ThinkGeek. And it's a little less than $70. And it's a pretty good sized purse. It's pretty cute. It's a green Stegosaurus bag and looks like there's a leaf kind of zipper thing.
It's got little tiny hearts for eyes.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even notice that. It looks, there's a picture of a person holding it, and it looks like you can fit a wallet and a cell phone, so good sized purse.
Yeah. It's got a strap too, so it's not one of those clutches that you have to carry all day.
Yeah.
Those are ridiculous. I'm not a fan.
I know. I like in the description, it says, bag is not dangerous, no teeth or claws.
Yeah, its mouth is definitely closed, but it does have some pretty cool spikes, and then it zips up in between the spikes too.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty nice looking little purse. I know most of the listeners are male, but if you have a significant other or female dinosaur enthusiast friend, this would be a good gift for them.
Or daughter, yeah.
Or if you are one of the female listeners, you could get it for yourself.
Yeah, it's a more affordable option than other ones I've seen out there. So it looks
definitely.
cool.
It's cheaper than that Coach one we talked about, and it's also a lot bigger and more useful.
And next, of course, we have to mention the Brontosaurus sweatshirt from Stranger Things that the Science Museum of Minnesota is selling.
Yeah, I'm guessing this sweatshirt is the most popular one because they're also selling a t-shirt of various formats and a hoodie, but the one that they keep featuring in images is the sweatshirt.
Well, that's the one that's in Stranger Things.
Oh, you're right, it is. Yeah.
So it makes sense. It's purple, it's got that skeleton of Brontosaurus, and then it says Science Museum of Minnesota at the bottom.
And Thunder Lizard, in case you forget what Brontosaurus means.
Yep. Plus, it's a cool name.
Yeah, and it's depicted in kind of an 80s posture with the tail near the ground and the neck having that droopy swoop to it. But it's pretty cool. For sure, if you're into Stranger Things or you know someone who is, it would be a good gift.
Yeah, it costs around $30.
For the hoodie.
For the hood. Oh, no, for the sweatshirt is $30. The hoodie is $37.
Oh, yeah. And then they have a t-shirt that's $20, and they have kid t-shirt and toddler t-shirts that are a little cheaper too.
Yeah. And the good thing about this is you can buy it online. So if you can't make it to Minnesota to the gift shop, you can purchase it online. They'll ship it to you.
I don't even know if you could get it in the gift shop too, because it sounds like it's really hard to get them there. So even if you're in Minnesota, probably just buy it online.
And next, these might be my favorite. This is something that we purchased earlier this year. They're these Dinosaur Lights that look kind of like origami, but they're plastic because they actually light up. And they made them we bought a orange T-Rex and a green Diplodocus one, but apparently there's also a pink Stegosaurus and a white Triceratops. And they're really cool. They'll give the room some nice ambiance. They're battery powered, so very portable. They're a decent size, you can fit them in your hand.
They're basically like, what would that be for a dinosaur? Maybe 1/20th scale or thereabouts. They're like maybe 6 inches long about. And well, I guess the sauropod would be a smaller scale because they're all similar size regardless of how big they are in real life.
Mm-hmm. And so actually these were a little bit hard to find because when we bought them earlier this year, they must have just been released and there were a bunch of stores that were selling them online. Now you kind of have to dig a little. I found one called iwantthose.com, and also the Natural History Museum in the UK sells these in their online shop, which is nice. So you can kind of go through and not all of them. It looks like the Natural History Museum only sells the Diplodocus and the Triceratops. So
you got to hunt around if you want the whole set.
Yeah.
We got the Diplodocus and the T-Rex for Sabrina's birthday party for some decorations.
Yeah.
And they call them lamps, but they're more like a night light. They're definitely like an
bigger
accent.
Than a night light,
but they're just an accent light. Like you couldn't light up an end table with it or anything. So it's not the kind of thing where you're going to get a lot of light out of it. But they're definitely cool decoration.
True. And as a bonus thing, I noticed this in the Natural History Museum shop online. They have a Diplodocus egg cup, and it's that same green origami style. Like it looks exactly like the lamp, except it's an egg cup, so it's made out of porcelain.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I guess that's a British thing.
It is a Brit. If you don't know, I know this because my mom lived in Britain for a number of years and brought this to us when we were kids growing up. An egg cup, if you have a hard-boiled egg, you put it in your cup and then you tap on it with your spoon, and then you scoop out the egg from the shell.
Yeah. It's an interesting, very British thing to do. But both the egg cup Diplodocus and the lamp have their neck twisted like it was broken by a professional wrestler or something. It's pointed backwards. But with the egg cup, that's kind of funny because it looks like it's about to eat the egg.
Yeah. So, Garrett, I might have to get that egg cup.
When do we use egg cups?
We don't, but I would use that one.
You'd start eating hard-boiled eggs just so you could get this.
It'd be just like my childhood, but with dinosaurs.
I guess. And next up, we've got the Steam Galaxy game called Go Extinct. And you might remember that we played this earlier this year, and we also interviewed the creator on the show. And it was a really fun game. So basically, it's like Go Fish.
But evolved.
Yeah. Good one.
Well, it says on the site.
Oh, not a good one. Not for you, at least. So it features a cladogram as the board, so it kind of teaches about evolution while you play it. And then you match different cards in the sets based on how they evolved. So you get like a mammal group, or you could get the dinosaur group, which is obviously the best group to collect. And it's for sale on their website, I think also on Amazon for $20. So pretty cheap. And if you're looking for a game to play with your family around Christmas time, and if they don't understand your passion for dinosaurs, or you want to increase their nerd cred a little bit, or your kids, then you should pick up this game for sure.
Yeah, we played it with our nephews who were 10 and 5 at the time.
Yeah, the 5-year-old, it was a little bit advanced for him, but he could pretty much get through it with a couple helping suggestions. The 10-year-old was all over it, though.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she had said in the interview that around 7 was the right age when people start to grasp it. So if you know people over 7 who like board games, this is a good choice.
Yeah, and we had a lot of fun doing it. It's a good family game.
Yes. A slightly more advanced game, which I got for my birthday, is called Bone Wars, and we also talked about this on the show. It's purely a card game. There's no board that goes with it, but despite that, it's pretty complicated and complex and takes a lot of strategy, actually. Like I said, we talked about it already, but basically you are assigned a famous paleontologist from the Bone Wars history, and then you get to try to build dinosaur exhibits from your finds, and you can basically lie about them, but then if you get caught, it penalizes you and you lose points. So it's a big question of how much you want to gamble that, whether or not someone can call you out on your mistakes.
Yeah, and we played this with 4 players, all adults, so it says ages 10 and up, and that was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed the quotes they had.
Yeah.
From what all the paleontologists said or wrote in newspapers.
Yeah, it was really well done. So if you're interested in a little bit more challenging of a game than a Go Fish style game, this one's a good choice.
Yeah, and this one costs around $20, so.
Yep.
Pretty good.
Up next, we have the Jurassic World soundtrack. We didn't talk about it when it came out.
We'll get you prepared for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom.
Yes, and you can buy it on Amazon either as a CD, an MP3, or on vinyl, in case you want the vinyl edition. It's 180-gram vinyl, if that matters to you. And it's got a giant T-Rex footprint full of water on the cover with like a reflection of a person standing so that you can be terrified. So if you really like the music in all the Jurassic Park movies is great. So I definitely recommend any of this stuff, especially if you liked the Jurassic World take on the original Jurassic Park kind of music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did like how they made it their own.
Yeah, for sure. And then in that vein, if you didn't pick up Jurassic World on Blu-ray or DVD when it came out last year, it's gotten quite a bit cheaper. You can get it between $11 and $12 on Amazon and Walmart and all these places. And it has a lot of special features in it. We covered it way back when it came out, but they have a segment called Welcome to Jurassic World, where Colin Trevorrow and Steven Spielberg talk about the making of the movies. And they also have parts that show all the different stunts that were done and the different CGI, as well as some deleted scenes and other cool behind-the-scenes footage in different little segments on the Blu-ray. So I think it's definitely worth picking up, especially if you're a Jurassic Park fan. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any commentary. The only one of the series that has commentary is Jurassic Park 3, which is by far the least popular Jurassic Park movie. So it's kind of unfortunate. But it's definitely worth picking up, especially if you want to kind of get in the mood before watching Fallen Kingdom next year. And you can get, when you get the Blu-ray one, it comes with a digital copy and a DVD as well. So for $12, it's pretty comparable to buying just the film alone on streaming, and then you don't get any of the special features if you do it that way through one of the streaming services like Apple or, the Amazon streaming. So I definitely recommend picking up the Blu-ray instead.
We're also recommending the Dinosauria Poster by Pop Chart Lab, and we talked about it when they first released it. It took them 500 hours of research and illustration, and it was like 100 hand-drawn dinosaurs, and then all of the taxonomy from the existing classification system, and they even incorporated what Ornithiscalida or Ornithicelida, however you would like to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's a really cool poster for sure. If you're looking for like an informative one-stop shop to all sorts of dinosaur information and cladistics, it's definitely a good choice.
Yeah, so it costs $37 on the website. Not bad, and it would make a great addition to your wall.
Yeah, I also like the style that they chose. It's like a very old school, parchmenty looking paper. Mm-hmm. So it's got a cool style to it. And I actually kind of appreciate, there isn't a lot of detail in the illustrations, but that kind of represents what we know about them. Most of the detail that's put on these dinosaurs is speculative. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're not the most detailed drawings.
Yeah. And then we've got a couple books that we're recommending. So the first is The Sauropod Dinosaurs, Life in the Age of Giants by Mark Hallett and Matthew Wadle. And we interviewed them, you may remember, in a previous episode where we talked all about sauropods and their work on this book. And I personally think it's an amazing book, not only if you're into sauropods, but if you want to just learn a little bit more about dinosaurs, like the science behind everything, it's a really good introduction because it's not dry like a textbook. There's a lot of really great illustrations, and they really break down the basic concepts for you.
Yeah. On their website, it says that it's 336 pages, 138 color photos, 200 color illustrations, 14 black and white illustrations, and 10 maps.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's pretty a lot of information.
I mean, at the very least, it's a very pretty coffee table book, but I would recommend reading it.
Yes. As a free option, too, there's also that Utah Paleontology one, which is similar length and probably has almost as many pictures in it. So if you just have a printer that's available, you could make a free dinosaur gift, or you could bind it or something.
Of a different book, yes.
Yeah, of that Jim Kirkland excellent addition to all the geology going on in Utah.
Yeah. But if you want the Sauropod dinosaur book, that one costs about $40.
It's definitely like a fancier book.
Well, it's hardcover, yeah. Plus it's sauropod, so you know. And our second book we're recommending is called Why Dinosaurs Matter by Kenneth Lacovera. And he's done some amazing work. Like, he is behind the discovery and description of Dreadnoughtus, which is that huge, huge titanosaur that its name literally means fear nothing. There's a really great picture. It's probably
Dreadnoughtus on the cover.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking there's a really great picture of him with, I think, like the femur or something that's longer than him, or one of those huge sauropod bones that's bigger than a person. So, yeah, Kenneth, this is part of TED Books. He did a TED Talk about why dinosaurs matter, which was really great. And it's talking about what we can learn from dinosaurs because they were such a successful group. They lasted for hundreds of millions of years, and like, what can we learn about them as humans and in our current time? Yeah.
I think it would be a great book to give to someone who's like, why do you care so much about dinosaurs? You have this ridiculous obsession. You give them a book titled Why Dinosaurs Matter, and they can find out exactly why you're so obsessed with dinosaurs.
There you go.
And that would only cost you $17. So not bad.
A $17 answer.
Yep.
Bit of a snarky answer, but still good.
And it's also probably just a very good book if it's anything like the TED Talk.
Yes, so we haven't read the book yet, but it is on my list, and the TED Talk was excellent.
Yeah, it just came out. We wanted to have a more recent book because we know a lot of listeners buy up books quickly. So if you put something on there that's a couple years old, people are going to be like, yeah, I know, I have it. And last year, we also talked about this knockoff Lego dinosaur pack, which I checked, and it's still available. So if there is a child in your life who wants some dinosaur Legos, most of them are super expensive, and all they really want are the dinosaur figurines. So like the Indominus Rex Breakout, I think is $250 or something. And the main reason people want it is because it has this cool Indominus Rex, but you can just buy that separately for like $2. So they have these packs that have different Lego figurines, I guess knockoff Lego figurines on Amazon and eBay and stuff that you can get for about $10. And I'm about to make a video. It might not be posted by the time this episode comes out, or it might be, showing how to put it together because I couldn't figure it out easily from the non-existent instructions that come with it. But it's definitely a cool gift. I got some for all my nephews and they love them. So I think it's a better choice than some of the Lego kits if they really just want the dinosaurs.
Yeah, they're pretty good looking dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Very close to how they appear in the movie, but I guess in Lego form. But
yeah. If your kid's picky, you could get 2 sets of them. And then if one of them doesn't work quite right, as happened with one of our dinosaurs, then you just have a backup. And it's still a lot cheaper than buying the official product. And of course, we also have our sponsor, TRX Dinosaurs, who makes probably the best dinosaur gift you could get for anybody.
Oh, yeah. Puppets or sculptures.
Yeah, a lifelike restoration of a dinosaur.
So note that orders do ship within 4 to 6 weeks, and it is a little more on the expensive side compared to the other gifts that we're recommending. But in terms of a realistic dinosaur that you can play with as a puppet or have as a sculpture in your living room or wherever you want to display it, really affordable.
Yeah, definitely. And you can get any sort of dinosaur that you could possibly imagine. And they're all built custom, so you could get any kind of detail and make it totally unique by giving it a specific eye color or something like that. So definitely, if you're interested in getting a really unique dinosaur piece for a dinosaur lover or yourself, you should really check out these TRX dinosaur sculptures.
Yes, and yes, they are our sponsor for this episode, but even if they weren't, we would recommend them.
We definitely would, yeah. They would definitely be on the gift guide. You got to have the one like really awesome dinosaur gift that would make everybody jealous. And this is definitely the best one. It's a lot better. I think last year we had an expensive Jurassic World head or something cheesy like that cost, I think, even more than a TRX dinosaur full body sculpture cost. So this is really would be a great gift.
Yeah, and if you want to see any of their works in progress, they post a lot of videos and pictures on Instagram at TRX Dinosaurs. And there's some really great ones of the dinosaurs interacting with cats.
Yes, as well as the full work in progress of the dinosaur. So if you want to see how the behind the scenes work, it's a good place to follow.
Yeah, it looks like the latest work in progress right now is Nomingia, an oviraptor. And in the latest picture, as of this recording, it's got its hands and feet painted, and it's kind of looking up with its mouth open, and the cat is looking up at it. I don't know if curiosity, bewilderment.
What's this giant bird? Could I still eat it like I do every other bird?
Exactly.
So if you're interested in checking out these dinosaurs, head over to Instagram at TRX Dinosaurs or go over to the form where you can order your own on trxdinosaurs.com.
And now we have our interview with Dr. Jordan Mallon.
So we're joined this week by Dr. Jordan Mallon, who's a dinosaur specialist at the Canadian Museum of Nature. His research focuses on dinosaur ecology, as well as ceratopsians and their lifestyles, growth, and evolution. And at SVP this year, he had a poster about the riddle of Upsidedown Ankylosaurs. So jumping right in, you named one of my favorite sounding dinosaurs ever just about a year ago, which I think is pronounced Spiclipius shiporum. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Spiclipius shiporum. That's how I say it anyways.
I love that. What was finding that dinosaur and describing it like?
It was a great experience. I didn't personally find it. It was found by a guy by the name of Bill Ship, hence the species epithet Shiphorum, right. Named after him and his family. So he has land up in Montana that he had bought, maybe 15 years ago or so, and he had heard through talking to the local townspeople that there were dinosaurs found in the area, so he thought it might be fun to take a look on his land to see if he could find anything on his land. And lo and behold, his first time out looking, he finds a new species of horned dinosaur. But he was not in contact with any paleontologists as far as describing it, and he knew that in order for the dinosaur to get a proper scientific name and be described in the scientific literature, that it would have to end up in a museum. He couldn't just hoard this thing in his basement. And so he does some work in the Ottawa area here. He's actually a physicist by trade. And so I met him one day at the museum here, and we got involved, and the museum ended up purchasing the specimen from him. One of the few times you were able to swing something like that. Yeah. And so that's how I got involved in the project.
Awesome. And then how'd you choose the name Spiclipius?
It's probably the same way anyone would pick a name. I had nothing to do on a Saturday morning while I was waiting for my kids to wake up, and I was just coming up with a list of possible names and seeing whether they would translate well into Latin or Greek or what have you. And Spiclipius just stood out to me. I thought some people don't like it; they think it's a tongue twister, but. I usually say it takes about 3 times and you can pick it up pretty good. And it just means spiked shield in Latin. And, there's enough ceratopsians that have ceratops at the end of the name. I wanted something that would stand out a bit more. So Spiclipius won the contest.
I think it's great. I think it kind of sounds like a Dr. Seuss kind of character or something, the way it has that sort of cadence to it.
Well, I initially wanted to call it Bodacious Ceratops because for various reasons, I think it's a great name. And but I ran it by a number of folks here at the museum who did not like it, and I don't know that they necessarily like Spiclipius any better, but I did, and that's what matters.
Cool. And then you also recently found another Chasmosaurine. Well, this is just a Chasmosaurus skull in Alberta, and you had to lift it out with a helicopter. How did that go?
It was sort of hit and miss. So this was a skull that I found with my crew in 2015. It was sticking out, the back end was sticking out of a hill, and thought we had, based on the bone texture, I thought we knew what we had at the time, but we knew we'd had to chase in after it just to confirm. And as we kept going, realized, sure enough, it's a horned dinosaur skull.
Nice.
And as these things usually go, you find the best find at the end of the field season. So we couldn't finish digging it up that year. So we came back in 2016 and spent a good part of that field season digging the skull up and realizing, well, we've got a whole skull of one of these long-horned Chasmosaurus canadensis, or Kazani, depending on who you ask. But my site, it was found out on the Saskatchewan River in southeast Alberta. And it's a pretty remote area out there. There's, zero access to my site by way of roads or anything like that. And the skull weighs 1,600 pounds, the block that we collected it in. So there's no way of hiking it up out of the Badlands either. It was just too steep. I have a fairly small crew. There weren't enough of us. So the helicopter was the only way to go, which finally happened this year. I arranged to have a helicopter come out. LR Helicopters based in Calgary, and they donated the lift to us.
Oh, nice.
And it had to be canceled, unfortunately. I was trying to get it out back in August of this year, but the weather wasn't cooperating, so we had 2 canceled lifts. So we rearranged it to have it picked up at the end of last month in September. And weather cooperated, the lift went off without a hitch, and it's en route right now on the way back to the museum here in Ottawa.
Great. Yeah, I heard those lifts can get really expensive because it's like they charge by the hour, and it's like $1,000 an hour or something like that.
Yeah, if not more. I was quoted initially $7,500 for the lift. And part of the problem is that the helicopter was coming from quite a ways away. It was coming from Calgary. My field site's actually closer to Medicine Hat in Alberta. But although there is a helicopter in Medicine Hat, it's too small and doesn't have the right rig to do the lift. So the next closest place that had, the resources available, what I needed, was in Calgary. And so it's quite a bit more when you're flying out from Calgary. But at the same time, I managed to do that flight with the pilot from Calgary to my site and back. So
cool.
I was on the helicopter for all of maybe 2.5 hours, which was pretty cool. I've never been in one before.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, if I had my druthers, I'd fly helicopter all the time now rather than taking the plane. But it gets expensive, as you say.
Yeah, cool. So I want to go to ankylosaurs because ankylosaurs are my favorite type of dinosaur. And you had that poster that was really cool at SVP about how ankylosaurs seem to just always end up upside down, or often end up upside down. And there were a few competing hypotheses for it. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into this from, working on ceratopsians? How did you make this transition into ankylosaurs?
Yeah, well, I wasn't necessarily interested in the ankylosaurs per se, although I do find them interesting too. Kind of what I found interesting was the taphonomic aspect of the project, which is how an animal becomes fossilized effectively, everything that happens after death on the animal's way into the geological record. And so I done a project a couple years ago on pachycephalosaur domes and how their preservation can inform us about where these animals were living. So this taphonomic aspect has been an area of research that I've been interested in over the last several years now, I guess. So reading the taphonomic literature, I was reading up on some work by, a predecessor of mine here at the museum in Ottawa, Charlie Sternberg. And Charlie had collected, probably more ankylosaurs than just about anyone. And he noticed over the years that as he was collecting these ankylosaurs, that by and large, they tended to be preserved upside down. And he just said that, he didn't provide any data to support himself. And that idea has been picked up, in textbooks and whatnot ever since then. It's been circulated, but no one's actually ever tested that. They've kind of just taken his word at it. So that was the first sort of aspect of this project, was trying to see whether or not that was true. So there's various ways we can do that. We can actually look at the field notes. Charlie was pretty good himself at recording the attitude of the specimens, their orientation, whether they were right side up or upside down when he found them. We can look at original field photos as well to confirm for ourselves whether or not the specimen was found upside down. Or you can look at indicators on the fossils themselves. So I was looking at things like skulls and pelvies and tail clubs on these ankylosaurs to check their orientation in the field. And, if you were to find records of sun bleaching and lichen growing on the top of the skull, those lichens only grow out in the exposed air. So that would be an indication that the skull was, right side up when it was found. Yeah. Otherwise, if you find those indicators or maybe weathering on the bottom surface of the skull, then that would indicate that it's upside down. So, I looked at as many specimens as I could that were collected from Alberta over the last 100 years or so. And I got a decent sample size. I can't remember. It was somewhere on the order of 30 or so. And, lo and behold, Charlie seems to have been right. These things are upside down more often than not.
So what of his, or I guess it wasn't his hypotheses, but what of the random speculations that people came up with for them ending up upside down do you think is the most likely?
So there have been a number of ideas over the years as to why these things end up on their backs the way they do. Baron von Nopscha described the type of Scolosaurus back in the early 1900s. And that was an animal found on its back. It's displayed at the Natural History Museum in London right now. And he suggested at the time that either the animal was very clumsy, so it may have tripped and, fallen down a hill and ended on its back that way. But to argue, that all of these ankylosaurs were clumsy, despite the fact that they've, survived for X number of millions of years, kind of, is a bit, well, it's a bit silly to think of, and it's also kind of a difficult idea to test.
Yeah.
How do you test that these are clumsy animals? I don't really buy that. Second of all, von Nopsche also suggested at the time that maybe they were being flipped over by predators, by carnivores, because if you're going to eat an ankylosaur, you can't attack that back that's covered in armor.
Mm-hmm.
You need to flip it over and attack that soft underbelly, which makes sense. And you see that depicted, in the popular media all the time.
Yeah.
Ankylosaurs being flipped over and munched on by tyrannosaurs or what have you. So that was a cool idea. And we can test that idea by looking for evidence on the bones of these animals. These carnivores should have been leaving tooth marks on the bones. We see that quite often, for example, in hadrosaurs. Hadrosaur bones have tooth marks on them all the time, mm-hmm. quite regularly. And it's for that reason that we think that hadrosaurs were sort of a main staple of tyrannosaurs. Interestingly, though, we don't see tooth marks at all, or at least very, very rarely on ankylosaur bones. And where we do see them, we don't see them on the upside down specimens.
Oh, interesting.
Preferentially. So, you'd expect if the upside down ones have tooth marks on them, then maybe it was the predators that were flipping them over. But that's just not the case at all. In fact, we see these tooth marks on ankylosaur bones extremely rarely. So I don't think that the carnivores were targeting the ankylosaurs with any regularity. And it certainly doesn't account for why they're ending up on their backs the way they do.
Interesting. There
was another idea put forward years ago by an ankylosaur researcher by the name of Ken Carpenter. He suggested that what's happening, he likened these ankylosaurs to armadillo roadkills. So he argued that when you see armadillos, dead on the side of the highway today, be it down in Georgia or wherever, what happens is after they get killed by a car and knocked to the side of the road, they end up lying on their sides. But as the body decomposes and the gases build up inside that body cavity, those gases push the legs outwards. The legs kind of splay laterally. And it's the legs that are touching the road, nearest the road, as they splay laterally, they push against the road and end up rolling the animal over onto its back. If you can, you know what I'm saying? I think I'm describing that well enough.
Yeah.
And so he argued that the same thing's happening in these ankylosaurs, which is fair enough. It's a neat idea. Had a hard time figuring out how we test that one. So I actually went out and sought a couple of armadillo researchers down in Georgia by the name of Jim Laufrey and Colleen McDonough. And they actually spent a summer last year gathering data on armadillo roadkills for me. And they found that actually more often than not, no, armadillos don't roll over onto their backs the way that ankylosaurs do. They do on occasion, and they could just as easily roll onto their stomachs from their backs. And we did some additional taphonomic work, putting these things in underneath basically plastic bins to keep the carnivores away, to ensure that it's the decomposition that's rolling them over and not predator activity or scavenger activity. So we did our homework there, and we did find that the armadillo roadkill analogy doesn't explain why these ankylosaurs end up on their backs.
Yeah.
So there's one final hypothesis out there, and it's been pretty well accepted over the years, but nobody's actually gone to the work of testing it, and that is the idea of this bloat and float hypothesis. So the idea is that these animals would die by the riversides, and the body would eventually be flushed into a nearby stream, and as that carcass would decompose, it would basically bloat, and the heavy armor on the back would cause the animal to flip. So you've got the heavy armor, wanting to sink towards the bottom of the water, and that light gaseous stomach obviously wanting to float to the top. So it creates a very unstable configuration. And so the body basically flips over and it floats down the stream and becomes preserved further downstream. So that's sort of the bloat and float idea. And we tested that with Don Henderson at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Alberta.
Cool.
And Don's, known for computer modeling floating animals. He's floated gators and ostriches, I think, and giraffes and certainly a number of dinosaurs. So I said, well, can you float an ankylosaur? And I'd like to see what happens if we bloat it up and how it behaves in water. And sure enough, it's quite an unstable configuration in water. And ankylosaurs are much more stable upside down than right side up when they're floating. So I think that kind of just confirms that idea.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing that's important to the story, the depositional environment. So where we see these upside down ankylosaurs, we only see that in North America, where these animals are being preserved in fluvial channels, so at the bottom of riverbeds and whatnot. They're preserved in basically aquatic environments. But where we find ankylosaurs in terrestrial environments, in aeolian deposits in places like the Gobi Desert, they are all right side up. So that suggests right there that water has a big part to play with the preservation of these upside down ankylosaurs here in North America.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think so.
So does that lend any credence to the idea of ankylosaurs swimming, that so many of them are ending up in these environments, or is that just a preservation bias that the ones that were in the water preserved and therefore they're the ones that get found and those are the ones that are upside down, so we find upside down ones?
Yeah, I doubt these guys were swimmers. There's certainly nothing about their anatomy that suggests they were swimmers or even, doing much by way of wading like a hippo. We don't see, there's nothing that would scream that they're doing anything like that. And certainly we might expect to see more of them where we do in North America if they were swimming, just because they would already be in those, living in those river habitats. But ankylosaurs are pretty rare. So I would think that they're not that, inclined to wading in the water. Gotcha. But we do find a lot of nodosaurids in marine habitats, which is really interesting. Maybe they were coastal animals, living alongside the coast, and when they died, their bodies would eventually float out to sea. But I'm not sure that I would describe them necessarily as living, wading in the water the way a hippo would today.
Yeah, from a layman's perspective, I would say an ankylosaur and a hippo look a little bit alike in that they're kind of lumbering and short and quadrupedal, but is it kind of the fact that their nasal opening is really low compared to a hippo? And what else would you look for to see that it might have been aquatic?
Well, certainly, swimming animals have their digits, their fingers and toes drawn out or elongated and then create flippers. And there's obviously nothing that we see like that in ankylosaurs.
Gotcha.
They've got fairly inflexible tails that would probably not be of much use in swimming. Mind you, that's true of hippos. They don't use their tails in swimming either. But it's just hard to envision the body being used in water. What would that club be used for if these things were sitting in water all day? maybe they were using it like a beaver or something like that. But there's no obvious aquatic adaptations in these ankylosaurs to suggest that they're certainly living in the water, but living, near the water or by the water on these coastlines. I certainly think there may be something to that.
Is there any, just curious, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this or not, but is there any difference between an animal that lives near a coast and lives, say, in the plains or in a forest that you could tell by anatomy?
Anatomically speaking, not that I know of. A really good way to get at a question like that would be to look at isotopes, and you can tell whether or not these animals are living or getting their water in fresh water or brackish water or marine water. You could tell that from the isotopes, but the anatomy, nothing springs to mind immediately.
Cool. Thanks for humoring me with a random question. I think that's pretty much all the questions I have about your poster. Was there anything else interesting you found out that you want to share?
With respect to that project, no. I'll say that the project is still in the works, but the paper's nearly done. I'm just waiting on some co-authors, and hopefully it'll be ready for submission soon. So keep an eye out for that, probably in the new year.
Great.
But it's kind of funny, as you say. I've worked so far quite a bit on horned dinosaurs. I sort of cut my teeth on those guys, but I've got a lot of ankylosaur research on the go right now, as it turns out. I'm almost becoming an expert on them, you could say. I've done some research. This latest project on the floating ankylosaurs. I've got a project in the works with Victoria Arbor that's in press right now on Ankylosaurus. We're sort of revisiting the anatomy of Ankylosaurus in light of recent research on Ankylosaurus more generally, and doing a description of a giant. In fact, it is the world's biggest Ankylosaur skull in the collections here at the Canadian Museum of Nature. Ken Carpenter illustrated it, back maybe 15 years ago, but we're giving it a better description in this paper and noting some interesting, features about Ankylosaurus that maybe weren't appreciated before that make it even more distinctive. It's a real, despite being the namesake of its suborder or whatever it is, Ankylosauria, it's really not representative of that suborder. It's very distinctive, and it's a bit of an oddball. So looking forward to sharing that research soon.
Awesome.
And I've got a student now working on ankylosaurs as well, and I'm off to China next month to work on an ankylosaurus project, or an ankylosaur project, I should say. So lots of cool stuff coming down the pipe related to the armored dinosaurs. I'm sure you'll appreciate that.
Oh yeah, the more ankylosaurs, the better. It's been a good year so far with Zool and Borealopelta.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see those things before they got described. Especially, I did my PhD in Calgary, and so I was at the Tyrrell Museum all the time, and I got to see Borealopelta prepared over the years. And every time you come back, you see a little bit more of the animal. And I mean, it really wasn't long before you could appreciate just what a cool fossil this would turn out to be.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that thing. I feel like we talk about it every show, but I can never talk about it too much.
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, like seeing the Mona Lisa or something like that. It really takes your breath away. So we're pretty lucky. Ankylosaurs aren't terribly common, and yet some of the nicest preserved dinosaurs we have are of ankylosaurs. There's Borealopelta, and I'm thinking also of that skeleton of Scolosaurus that I mentioned earlier. That's in the museum in London. There's all kinds of really good. I know the ROM in Toronto has a good ankylosaur skeleton too. It's kind of disarticulated, but it's got the skin preserved as well.
Oh, nice. So
there's a number of really beautiful ankylosaurs out there, despite the fact, again, that they're quite rare. Compare that with something like a small theropod. Those are also pretty rare as far as we can tell, but they tend to just be, scattered elements.
Yeah, true. Cool. Anything other than ankylosaurs that you're working on?
I've branched off of ankylosaurs, kind of jumped off from them, I guess. Speaking of armored animals, and I've been doing a little bit of work lately on turtles too.
Oh, cool.
We've got a big backlog of fossils collected, over 100 years ago from the Sternbergs that we're still opening it up, and they still occasionally yield some neat surprises. So a couple of years ago, we opened up a turtle shell that belongs to a tortoise-like species called Basilemys. And we've got a new species of Basilemys, so I would argue that's in press right now, or at least it's in review, I should say, in the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology. So that's my first turtle paper, and we'll see whether or not it's up to snuff shortly.
Yeah, I think that's partly the reason why occasionally people talk about ankylosaurs being aquatic, is because they kind of have a turtlishness to them.
In a way, they certainly did, yeah. And actually, one of the, Basilemys is neat as far as turtles are concerned, because it's got a very low shell. And in low-shelled turtles, the low-shelled turtles tend to be the ones, or the flat turtles basically, tend to be the ones that swim in the water.
Yeah.
And yet, despite that, it's got these very elephantine feet, much like a tortoise, which we know aren't aquatic. And so there's this sort of these conflicting characters that make interpretation of its paleoecology a bit problematic, and as far as I'm concerned, very interesting. And so there's a project there. If maybe I'll put out a pitch, I've got some money for a master's student who would make a great master's project looking at the paleoecology of Basilemys. So if anyone's interested, drop me a line, because have I got a project for you?
Cool. Yeah, definitely. That would be interesting to see. What era is that guy from?
It's living alongside the dinosaurs at the end of the age of the dinosaurs. So these are late Cretaceous dinosaurs, or turtles rather, 75, 65 million years ago on that order.
So maybe since you're getting into turtle research, you can finally figure out how related to dinosaurs they are, since that's been the biggest question for a while.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch over the years. Turtles have always been problematic as far as pinning them down in the tree of life. Turtles and bats and even ichthyosaurs, we never had, great transitional fossils for, but we're getting them now. And we're able to tell much more easily these days where they fit in. And of course, you've got things like gene barcoding and whatnot too, that are helping us to sort these things out.
I can't even imagine a transitional turtle because you need the ribs to go outside the rest of the body, basically. Which is just such a weird thing to have.
It's strange, and that's certainly not an area of my expertise. But 2 doors down from my office here, we've got Dr. Xiaocheng Wu, who was one of the co-authors describing Odontocheles out of China. One of these very early, turtley things that kind of look halfway between a turtle and a lizard, I guess, cool. a non-turtle, anyways. So yeah, as I say, we're getting these specimens now, and I think the most recent they're certainly a lot closer to dinosaurs and archosaurs, anyways, than we initially pinned them as. We just thought they were this aberrant group that had nothing to do with anything else, alive today, and it turns out they're just highly derived, probably archosaurs or stem archosaurs or something like that.
Nice.
Yeah, neat surprises.
Cool. Is there anything else you'd like to share, or a place where people can go to find out more about your work?
Yeah, sure. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I was tweeting from the helicopter there a few weeks ago when I was doing the lift live from the helicopter. That was kind of neat. And I'm at Jordan_Malin on Twitter. I try and tweet out, all the latest museum activities that we're doing here. You can follow along and seeing what's going on in the prep lab and, seeing what's going on as far as research is concerned as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, and I'll be sure to follow your progress on these new ankylosaur discoveries. They sound really cool.
Yeah, well, as I say, it'll be on Twitter, and as we prep our new Chasmosaurus skull that's coming in this week too, I'll be sure to post updates on that too.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
My pleasure, Garrett. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again, Jordan, for the great interview. I'm sorry I missed it, but I know Garrett really enjoyed talking about Ankylosaurus.
Yeah, it was really amazing. Oh, man. TRX Dinosaurs should make an Ankylosaurus. That would be so cool. I just realized, because I was thinking about our gift guide, and we didn't have any Ankylosaurus stuff on there.
Yeah, but we could.
You could. Yeah, that would be awesome.
So maybe we'll be filling out that request form.
We might.
And now onto our dinosaur of the day, Lufengosaurus, which was a request from Dinosaur 4602 via YouTube, so thanks. It was a Massospondylid that lived in the Jurassic in what is now China at Shawan near Lufeng in Yunnan province, and the name means Lufeng lizard. Meinian, a geologist, found the fossils in the late 1930s, and then paleontologist Yang Zhongjian, also known as C.C. Young, also known as the father of Chinese vertebrate paleontology, helped him in 1938, and Yang named Lufengosaurus huenei in 1941, and the genera name obviously refers to Lufeng, and the species name is in honor of Yang's old tutor, Friedrich von Huene. Yang's description, though, was hindered because this was during World War II, and he didn't have access to all the papers, and he wasn't able to fully compare this dinosaur with related dinosaurs. He ended up naming a second species between 1940 and 1941 and described it in 1947 as Lufengosaurus magnus, which means the large one. And some have considered Lufengosaurus magnus to be a junior synonym of Lufengosaurus huenei. Generally, though, it's considered to have two valid species, Lufengosaurus huenei and Lufengosaurus magnus. Yang also named Gypasaurus sinensis in 1940, but then in 1976, Peter Galton suggested it was identical to Lufengosaurus. So the type species Gypasaurus capensis was already considered by many to be a synonym of Massospondylid. But then in 2004, Galton and Upchurch suggested that Gypasaurus sinensis was its own species. Michael Cooper suggested in 1981 that Lufengosaurus and Yunnanosaurus were species of Massospondylid, but in 2005, Paul Barrett and others analyzed the skull of Lufengosaurus huenei and found that it was its own genus. Zhao Shijing named another species of Lufengosaurus changduensis, based on fossils found in Tibet, but it's not described in its nomum nudum. There's also Tawosaurus, which is a synonym of Lufengosaurus. About 30 specimens of Lufengosaurus have been found, and Lufengosaurus magnus was up to 1/3 longer than Lufengosaurus huenei. It was a small early sauropodomorph, about 20 feet or 6 meters long, although Gregory Paul estimated Lufengosaurus magnus to be 30 feet or 9 meters long and weigh 1.9 short tons. It had a long neck and short forelimbs, and it was probably bipedal. It also had sharp claws and a large thumb claw, and its claws could have been used for defense or for getting food from trees. The skull is about 10 inches or 25 centimeters long, and it had a deep, broad snout, with bony bumps behind large nostrils and on the cheeks. It had a bony ridge on its upper jaw, and it probably had large cheeks, and it had closely spaced serrated teeth. It was probably herbivorous, though it may have been omnivorous. And a lot of eggshells and Lufengosaurus embryos were found in a bone bed in Yunnan in 2013. The bone bed was probably a collection of nests destroyed by flooding. There were about 200 bones found. In December of 2015, 2 Lufengosaurus skeletons, one of each species, was found while workers in China were building a road, and there may be a museum built over the site to preserve the fossils in the future. Lufengosaurus grew rapidly, and it may have done that to kind of outgrow potential predators, and it lived at the same time and place as Dilophosaurus. Lufengosaurus was the first complete dinosaur skeleton mounted in China in 1958, and there was a commemorative postage stamp also made. You can see Lufengosaurus in the Paleozoological Museum of China.
There's also a Lufengosaurus in the Hong Kong Science Museum that Sabrina and I got to see, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's notable for being the only real dinosaur fossil, at least Lufengosaurus, that has been loaned to a museum outside of mainland China. And our fun fact of the day was created by Sabrina this week.
What? You're using that?
Yeah, she made it a long time ago, but it seemed like a good time to use it. It comes from the book by Mark Hallett and Matt Wadel, which is all about sauropods that we covered in our gift guide.
So it's a sauropod fact.
Yes. And it's that sauropods may not have been that dumb, according to them and Sabrina.
Yeah, they get a bad rep.
Basically, they argue that larger animals tend to have relatively smaller brains than related small animals, and that doesn't necessarily correlate exactly to intelligence. Specifically, they cite going from a mouse to an elephant, that the brain size doesn't increase as fast as the body size, but the elephants are still very intelligent animals. They can draw themselves in self-portraits with a paintbrush and do all sorts of other intelligent things. So it's hard to tell what exactly would happen with brain size if you extrapolate that another 5 to 6 times of size. And we don't have any modern correlates either, so it's very speculative to wonder. On top of that, we don't know what kind of density of neurons the brains had, so it's a little bit hard to tell just how smart dinosaurs were, and maybe sauropods weren't all that dumb. Maybe ankylosaurs weren't either, because they're always getting the short end of the intelligence stick too.
True. I bet sauropods were smarter, though.
Than ankylosaurs? I don't know about that.
I'll go ahead and believe that.
Science isn't about belief, it's about facts.
Well, but we don't know for sure, so why can't my opinion be?
I suppose.
At least for now. And that wraps up this episode of I Know Dino. Thanks again for listening. I hope you got some good ideas if you're last minute shopping. And if you want to join our growing community, please check out our page at patreon.com/iknowdino. Thanks again, and until next time.
Thank you for listening to I Know Dino. If you have any questions or comments about dinosaurs, we'd like to hear from you at plesiosaur at iknowdino.com. And for more information on dinosaurs, go to iknowdino.com or follow us on Google, Facebook, Tumblr, or Twitter at I Know Dino.